Hey guys, today we're going to be working on the VFX shot that we saw at the beginning of the video. Now before we get started, if you want to work along with us, you can go ahead and download all the files I used for this tutorial series in the description below, along with my blend file. Also, I would like to mention that this is going to be a 3-part tutorial series. In today's episode, we're just going to be working on the helicopter object and all of the stuff to do with that. So let's go ahead and get started. Okay guys, before we actually hop inside the Blender, we actually need to download the free model off of online. Now this is the model I found. Thank you to Pletios Movies for making this available for us. This is only for personal use, so you can't use it in anything you're going to be making commercials or anything like that. But for us, we're just going to go ahead and download. Then we just want to download this RAR file. Now, after we have the RAR file downloaded, you'll get a folder like this. Now, you will need WinRAR or 7-zip to actually unzip this. So I'm just going to double click on this. I have WinRAR installed, so you just want to make sure you do that. Now that we have this open, we can actually go ahead and go to wherever we want to drag these files into. So all we need is the OBJ file. So we're just going to drag and drop that over there. And also this little textures folder. We can just drag and drop that over there. We don't really need anything else, so we can just go ahead and close out of that. Okay, so now hopping on over into Blender, we can go ahead and import the object. So let's come up to File, and we're going to go to Import, and then Wavefront. Then we need to locate wherever we save that file. So here is where I save my file. We're just going to click this OBJ folder and then hit import. Now it should take a little bit to actually import the thing in, but once we have it in, we should see that it is huge. So that's good for now. We don't really need to scale it or anything at the moment. We'll actually save this as its own blend file and then import it into another blend file later. Now this model already comes with its own UVs, so if we click this and hit tab to go into edit mode, you should see all these blue lines and everything, so that's actually looking really good. The creator of this has already UV mapped out the actual helicopter, so that will be really useful when we actually texture the object. Okay, so like I said, the first thing that we need to do is actually texture the object. So let's come up to the shading tab, and then we can just zoom out a bit. It already sets it up to material preview, so that's the one we want to be on. So if we come to the material properties of this object down here, we can see that we already have all these materials set up. Let's just take one for example and then make this, I don't know, red or something. You can already see that it corresponds to the side that we want. So let's just change that back to white real quick. So basically we're just going to be going down the list of these materials and then setting them to what the material should be like, and also including some of the textures that the creator has linked in the project. So for the first one, we're just going to go down the line. For the instrument panel, we're just going to open up a image texture node. We're going to plug the color into the base color. Then we're going to open up the textures. So here's my textures folder. We're going to open that up. And for this one, we are looking for the dash. So we can just open that image. And you will notice that nothing has really changed in the helicopter. And that's actually because this texture is only linked to a certain part of the helicopter. So if we zoom inside the cockpit, you'll actually see what the texture that we just added is. It's this little dash right here. So that's what we want. Since we're not really going to be seeing that, we don't need to spend too much time on it. So let's just go on to the next one, glass. If you're ever confused about where the texture is actually going to be on the helicopter, what I like to do is actually come to this base color over here and then play around with the color just to see where it is. So now that I know it's here, I know what parts of the helicopter it's actually going to be affecting. So now I can use that better. So since this one says glass, we're going to, of course, just add a quick glass BSDF. Make it very easy like that, and then plug the BSDF into the surface. Okay, so now we have two of the textures correctly on the actual model. I actually like to come to render view. Let's just go to render view. You will notice that we don't really have any light or anything to actually see. So I'm actually just going to quickly add a sun lamp. So let's just bring that up here, maybe rotate it a bit, just so we can actually see what it looks like a little bit better. Also quickly, I'm going to go ahead and go over to cycles. I just like using cycles a bit better because it's more accurate to real life. Now this might be a good time to go ahead and save our project. So I'm just going to go up here, hit save as, and then I'm going to name mine helicopter. And save that. Okay, so now if we just go back to the material properties, we can go ahead and continue down the list. For the other panel, we're just going to add a quick image texture, and we're going to be adding a lot of these image textures. So I'm actually going to select this base image texture node, then hold Control and C just to copy that in case we need to paste it later on down the line. So I'm just going to plug that into the base color again. Open. We need to go to the textures folder again, and then select this one. we can just open that image and it should automatically apply it to the inside. Next is the interior generic steel panels over here. Let's just see where that is real quick. We can see that it's kind of inside and everything, and it does say that we need it to be a steel panel. So what I'm going to do is just going to set this back to white first of all. Just going to decrease the color a bit, add some metallic, and then let's just decrease the roughness ever so slightly, just to give that inside look. Next comes the more interesting part of the plane, and that is actually the right hand body texture. So if I change around the color here, we should see that it matches to this side of the actual helicopter. So what we can do is just hold Control V, paste that image texture node like we had earlier. Then we're going to open the texture corresponding to this. Now the texture we need is the OSCR JPEG right here. So we're just going to open that image and then paste that into the base color, and you should see that the UV correctly aligns and everything, and it looks really good. So we don't really need to play around with the UV at all here. We do also have another texture we can add down here, so I'm just gonna again Control V to add a image texture node. I'm just gonna open that up again and go back into the textures, and we're actually looking for this bottom one here, the SBMP. This is the bump map of the actual helicopter, so we're just gonna click on that, open image, and then we can plug this color into the normal. However, you'll see that it kind of messes up and everything. So the first thing that we need to do is set the color space from srgb to non-color. So this is correct for what we need it for. Next, we actually need to convert this from color to normal. Right here, you can see that the colors of these aren't really matched, and so they actually need to be. So let's just upload a bump node, plug that in between here. But instead of the color going into the normal, we actually need the color to go into the height information. So now if we go ahead and zoom in, we can see what that's done. We can see that it's basically added some detail like the bolts and stuff around the helicopter, and just adds a lot more realism to the scene. So that is also correctly UV mapped and everything, so it looks really nice. Okay, so that is the correct color setup for this one. Let's move on to the headlight. Let's just see where that is. I'm just going to make this one, you can kind of see down here, just going to make this a darker red. It doesn't really stand out too much, but just nice to add. Next, for the trim, let's see where this is. We can kind of see that this is the same kind of white color, or at least it needs to be. So what we can do is let's add a texture node. Then let's open the right-hand side texture that we had used earlier. We can see that kind of matches pretty well, except for this part right here. So what we can do is come to the UV editing section. We're going to come over here to this side. And we know that this kind of part right here is what's screwing us up. So let's hit 3 to go into face select. Then we can click here, click one of these faces right here, and hit Control L. That'll select the basic UV map where it needs to be. So here it is over here. Then we can just scale this down like you would normally in the 3D viewport. Just scale that down. Let's place it right here. Let's see how that looks in rendered view. Okay, so that's looking a lot better. Again, just to select those, if anything else is wrong in your thing, say this door is having the wrong texture on it, what you can do is, again, just select a face right here, and then hold Control L, and that'll actually select the whole UV map associated with that area. Okay, so now that we have that done, we're ready to move on to the black painted steel. Let's go back to our shading tab. This one, like it says, is just painted black steel. Let's see where that is on the actual craft. So we can see that it's kind of up here and a little bit down. So again, let's just change it back to white. I'm going to decrease this a little bit, push the metallic up, and then also play around with the roughness just until I get something that I like. You can kind of zoom in up here just to see what it's doing a little bit, but let's play around with that roughness. You might need to play around with the specular too, but that is looking good for my taste. Okay, next we're going to go on to the glossy white texture. We're just going to keep it white. To make it glossy, let's just turn the roughness down. First of all, let's actually see where this area is being affected. So right here, we can just kind of zoom in like that. Change this back to white. So to make it more glossy, we're just going to increase the specular. Maybe add a bit of metallic, not too much though. And so that looks good for me. I'm just going to leave it there. Aluminum now, we can just come down to this. I'm going to change the color to kind of a gray texture. Metallic needs to go up and roughness down. You can kind of see here on the handle where that's at. So that looks pretty good. Next is the mirror. Again, I'm just going to add a quick glass bsdf. The mirrors are actually on the side. We're not going to see them too much, so we don't really need to put that much effort into them, but you can see if you're interested, you can actually see them right here. Okay, for the reflector red, we're just going to change this to an easy red color, just because it's so small in the model. It's right up here if you're interested. The top texture. So now it gets more interesting again. We're going to add in our image texture. I'm going to open that up to the texture tab, and this one that we're looking for is this OTC. So just going to open that and then plug that color into the base color. So if we scroll around here, we can see that it's added the top texture. So that's looking pretty good and everything's great. Okay, next is another interesting one, the left hand side. We're basically going to do the same thing that we did for the right hand side, but now for the left. So let's just add in our two image textures, plug one into the normal and then one into the base color. For the base color, we can go ahead and open up the texture associated with that, and that one is this one, the OSCL JPEG right here. So just open that up. Okay, so that is looking good. Next, we just need to actually import our bump map for this. So let's just go ahead and hit right here. We can go to the bump map that we have, and then it's already set it to non-color, so that looks good. And then one final thing that we need to actually add is to add on our bump node again. So let's just type in bump, place that there, and make sure this is plugged into the height. Okay, moving on, let's go to the flat back. Let's see where this is. I kind of forget sometimes. That's just basically in there, so we don't really need to mess around too much with this one. Let's just change it down to black, maybe decrease the roughness, but that looks good enough. Okay, so for the bottom texture, let's go ahead and add in the texture node again. We're going to open textures, and then we need this one, the OBC. Open image, place that into the color. And there we go, that looks pretty good. Finally, just some finishing touches. We need to add a front seat color, so I'm just going to make that a little gray. We're not going to be really seeing in here too much, so we don't really need to really mess around with these as much. Let's just make this a little yellow color. Safety orange, like I said, just make it orange around there. That's good. And then for the tire tread, what I'm going to do is just make this black. So let's make that black like that. I'm going to decrease the specular and roughness a bit, and then I'm actually going to add in a wave texture. Let's go ahead and add that in here. And I'm going to add a bump map, plug the normal into the normal, this color into the height, and then if you have the Node Wrangler add-on, you can hold Shift Control click to view that a little bit better. Let's see, we actually need to change from X to diagonal, I think. Let's scale this up a bit just so we can see what's going on. So that is looking good. This is kind of the effect that you want. So we're just going to plug this factor into the height. And then that should gives us some little grooves, kind of like tire treads. So that's what we're going to stick with. Finally, let's add this propeller gray. Let's just kind of come up here. So we need kind of a gray metal material. So right there, I'm going to increase the metallic, decrease roughness. And that's looking pretty good for me. Okay, so now we are actually done with texturing our helicopter. If we kind of scroll around and stuff, you can see that all the textures are there. If for any reason you don't like some of the textures or something is off, you can always play around with it and kind of design it on your own. But these are the textures I'm going to stick with for my shot. Now we can actually come back over to the layout tab. We are done with texturing. Now we actually need the helicopter blades to be separate from the object. If you see now, we move around the whole object and spin it around and everything. It's actually affecting the whole object, where actually we want the blades here and also back here to be separated from the object, so we can actually control those individually. So first, let's go into edit mode by hitting tab. And we can kind of do this back blade first. This is the easier of the two, just because of all the geometry and stuff. So let's come to an angle like this, just so we can actually have the blade kind of in its own quadrant with nothing behind it. Then we're going to hit this. This basically allows us to select faces that are not in our physical view. So if I have this turned off right now and then select some of these faces, if I go around, you'll see that some of these faces over here aren't selected. But if I do that same thing with now it on, you'll see that all these faces are selected. So with it still on, let's come to the side here. And then I'm going to press C to go into this little mode right here. And then you can go basically just hold and select all the faces associated with this little blade here. You do want to make sure to not get the actual background here. So if I was to select this now, I'd get some of the geometry in the back. So we just want to select all the faces that aren't touching geometry. You can kind of force your camera to select only the faces that we need. Then you want to kind of zoom in a little bit here and select all these faces attached to here. You can kind of go around your object and see if any faces aren't selected, or you can also hit G to move and make sure that it moves around like this. No, like geometry is just sticking weirdly anywhere. Now with this selected, we can actually separate this from the actual helicopter. To do that, we're going to hit P on our keyboard and then separate by selection. This will separate this and make it into its own object. You can kind of see there's an 001 right here. So that's actually corresponds to this little part right here. So now if we moved around, it won't stick to any geometry. Now if I actually move this around, you can see that there's this little piece that's not attached to it, and that actually might be seen in the render. So let's change it. We can hit period on our numpad to actually zoom into whatever we have selected. Let's just rotate around here. And you can kind of see this face right here isn't really connected to the actual propeller. It's connected to this helicopter. So if you ever have this issue, all you want to do is select that. Go into the edit mode, hit C again, select both of these faces, then you can just hit P again to separate by selection. Now we have this being its own object. To combine this object with our propeller, we can actually select both of them and then hold Control and hit J. This will actually make them its own object together. Okay, so now we have the propeller, but if we rotate it right now, we should see that it doesn't rotate along its axis. So what we actually need to do is set its individual origin. So to do that with it selected, we're just going to right click, set origin, and then center of mass volume. You should see that the little dot is in the center of it right now, so that is looking good. Let's just come to a side view. We also need it to be straight up. You can kind of see it's angled right now. So this will just make the animated process a lot more easier in the future. So let's just rotate that to make it straight along the z-axis. So that is looking a lot better and should be a lot easier to actually animate. Okay, so now that we have our propeller done, it's basically the same thing for our main propeller up here. Let's just select this, press the period. We're going to come over here, go into edit mode. Now this one is very tricky. It is closer to a lot more geometry, so we got to be really careful on what we select and what we don't. So first I'm going to come over here, make sure this X-ray is turned on, and then just start selecting all the wings and stuff. All this geometry up here is very easy to select. Just make sure you don't hit anything like this fin up here or anything. Again, to go into the mode I'm using, you just hit C on your keyboard. And you should just be able to click and hold and drag this over. And you want to try to get everything into the actual propeller. So that's looking good. We also need this thing right here. So again, hit C, just select all this stuff. Okay, I have carefully selected all the points in here. I know that I have selected all of them because if I hit G and I moved around and everything, I don't really see any faces that aren't moving along with it. So I can just right click that to get it back into its original place. And like before, we need to separate this into its own object. So let's hit P, separate by selection. Again, the origin point is kind of weird. So if I rotate this, let's get out of this by hitting tab, then selecting the object we just made. So if I rotate this, you should see it rotates kind of weird. So again, we just need to right click, set origin to center of mass volume. Now it rotates correctly. Okay, so now that we have both of the propellers actually separated into their own objects separate from the body, we can see that we actually have most of the modeling and everything done. However, if we move around this helicopter, we should notice that the propellers don't really follow it. So an easy thing to do is to just parent the wings to the actual body. So let's go ahead and select that. You want to select whatever you want to parent first. So I selected the propellers, and then what you want the parent to be is second. So I just selected that, and then you can hold Control P and then parent to object. And then we're just going to do the same thing for this propeller back here. Select this one first and then the body, Control P object. So now if we move around this helicopter, you should see that both of the propellers actually follow it and everything is looking good. Now that is basically everything I did for my own shot. Now if you want to get a little more advanced, you can maybe mess around with some of the geometry here. You can see that the wings kind of dip down a little bit. Maybe if you want to add some bones to the scene so that the blades actually fold up when you actually start flying and everything, you could do that. But this is where I'm going to leave it here. This is nice and fast realism for our scene thanks to some free online models and textures. Now one last thing that we need to do before we can actually move on to part 2 is to actually go ahead and delete everything but the helicopter. So let's just go ahead and get rid of the camera, cube, light, and the sun in our scene. We can just delete those just so the helicopter is the only thing in our actual scene. So now we can just go ahead and hold Control S to save, and we're finally done with the helicopter. Okay guys, that's going to do it for part 1 of this tutorial. If you're just interested in modeling the actual helicopter and doing all the texture work and stuff, you are finished. Again, I will remind you that this model and everything is only for personal use, so please, if you plan on making money or anything off of this, please do not use this model, or reach out to the creator and see if you could maybe buy the license for commercial use. Anyways guys, please like and subscribe for part 2 coming out very soon. But anyways guys, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you guys later. Peace.